Hello everyone, today we're going to do the Math Practice 1 No Calculator section. Throughout these questions I'm going to give a couple of tips on how to solve them, so let's begin. The first question is, if x minus 1 divided by 3 equals k and k equals 3, what is the value of x? To do this, I like to do a little trick where we actually solve the equation and then input the value. This would make it kind of simple to actually do the question and there's less mistakes involved. So we basically first do the whole entire equation, and now we have it. We just do that, and we get x equals 10, which is the answer. From there, we move on to the second question, which is imaginary number. These look a bit daunting, but after a bit of work, you can easily solve these. Seeing through these parentheses, we can learn, due to the commutative property, that we just put these so that it is easier to solve and it looks more clear to us. With this, we just add these up and we get our answer of A. Now, the third question is a bit more complicated. On Saturday afternoon, Armand sent M texts each hour for 5 hours and Tyrone sent P text each hour for 4 hours. Which of the following represents the total number of messages sent by Armand and Tyrone on a Saturday afternoon? To do this question, I like to divide it up into two parts. First, let's find out how much Tyrone sent. Tyrone sent P messages each hour for 4 hours. That means each hour he sends P messages for 4 times, which equals 4P. Meanwhile, if we do the same thing here for Armand, he sent M messages each hour for 5 hours, which is basically 5M. We add these up as per the question asks, we should get the answer of C. The next question is about Kathy. Kathy is a repair technician for a phone company, and each week she receives a batch of phones that need to be repaired. The number of phones that have to be left to fix at the end of each day can be estimated with P equals 108 minus 23D, whereas P is the number of phones left and D is the number of days that she has worked that week. What is the meaning of this number here? Essentially, we have to look through the question and we have to find out what each part of the equation means, and then we can narrow down and find out what this one means. P obviously is the number of phones left, and 23 days is how much she has. So this must be the total amount of phones that she has to start out with, as this is getting subtracted from this so that we get the number of phones left. The answer is automatically B. Now these questions are pretty much varying difficulties, right? There's not easy to hard all the way down here. It's sometimes easy, easy, hard, or hard, easy, easy. And so it's kind of important to look at that. When you're sort of stuck on a question, it's good to always skip on and move on and then solve it towards the end. So let's begin with question number 5. This equation is kind of big, but if we narrow it down, it should be quite simple to solve. Using the same method we did over here, we have to first expand the parentheses because the parentheses make it quite difficult to see what's going on. So we just write down the question here and then that's why we see a minus, right? So the minus changes all the signs. So that means this minus minus becomes a plus. And here we go. We have this plus becomes a minus and the minus becomes a plus. All right. So now we just look at what we have here. X squared plus 2y, these two. Using the method of elimination, we know we have to have 2xy squared because as per it shows here. All right. So that means this is automatically wrong, and this is automatically wrong. So therefore, we'll have 2x squared y. Then we have to subtract minus y squared and plus 3y squared. So that means it's automatically 0y squared. So we just cross off this as well. That automatically reaches us with the correct answer of C. And if we move on to calculate, we would definitely, after crossing off these two things, it would be basically 5xy minus 3xy, which is 2xy, which would be our answer. Now, let's move on to question number 6. H equals 3a plus 28.6. So essentially, this is an equation for this sort of problem here. A pediatrician uses the model above to estimate the height of H of a boy in inches and in terms of the boy's age, A, in years. Between the ages 2 and 5, based on the model, which is an estimated increase in inches of the boy's height each year. So essentially, this would be the starting age, starting height, 28.6, and this would be his total height. So with this, each year he grows up, he would essentially gain 3 inches, and therefore this would be the answer. All right, so question number 7. We have this quite large formula, which looks pretty daunting, but let's start out anyways. M equals R over 1,200 multiplied by 1 plus R over 1,200 to the power of n divided by 1 plus R over 1,200 n minus 1 multiplied by p. The formula above basically gives a monthly payment of M needed to pay off a loan of P dollars at R% annual interest over N months. Which of the following gives P in terms of M, R, and N? So essentially, this equation, you don't really need to understand this. All you have to do is bring P over here and M over there. First step is obviously to bring M to the other side so that it's a bit simpler. So 1, because 1 times M, so M gets divided, equals this whole equation. We'll represent it by X. I'll represent this equation by Y to make it simpler to write. And that would be how it would look. If we continue this onwards, 1 divided by P equals X over My. If we switch these two around, we get P equals My over X. That means the correct answer would thus be choice B over here. If we fully expand this, P, My would mean that it is M on top, so M would be right here, and Y, which is this, would be in the numerator, and then X, which was this whole part, would thus be in the denominator, and therefore the answer is B as we solved. All right, so moving on to number 8. In this question, if A over B equals 2, what is the value of 4B over A? Now the trick over here is quite simple. Just look at the question. Now we try to make this part, A over B, look as close as possible to 4 over B over A. And then we sort of make them look the same. So with that, let's begin. A over B equals 2, right? Then we have to make this somehow B over A. that equals 1 over 2. Since if we flip over this side, we have to flip over this side. That means that if we have this, we just multiply both sides by 4 because it's 4b over a. That means 4b over a equals 1/2 times 4. 4 divided by 2 is actually equal to 2, which gives our answer of C. Now, question number 9. This is actually a system of equations, right? There are a couple of ways to solve it. One is graphing, the other would be elimination, the other would be substitution. Since we do not have access to calculators, it's unreasonable to make a graph. Therefore, we're left with 2 ways. One is elimination, where we can multiply this bottom equation by 2, and we can cross off the y's and we can solve for x. Well, the other would be substitution, whereas we find the value of x in terms of y, and we input that in this first equation. For the sake of simplicity, I will be first solving with elimination. So we'll write down the question here, -23. Then we'll multiply this by 2. So that means it'll make it 4y. Then we'll multiply this by 2 as well, so it's 2x. And then if we're multiplying this part by those two parts by 2, we have to multiply this part by 2, which equals a -38. Once we subtract this, we should get these two things would cancel out, and this -2x would become positive. So therefore, it'd be 5x equals, and since this is negative, and we're subtracting the equations, this also becomes positive. So it becomes 5x equals 38 minus 23, which is 15, which means x equals 3. From this alone, we can conclude it's B, but just to check our answers, we'll just input 3 in any of these equations. Since x is just this part, it's quite simple to input in the second equation. So 2x minus 3 equals -19. Therefore, this -3, if we add 3 on both sides, we get 2y equals 16, and therefore y equals -8. We'll add a negative here, just in case. And therefore, the answer is B. Okay, moving on to question number 10. Looking at this, it's quite new compared to all the other questions. So what we do is we first write down what g of x, the whole question first. Our goal in this is to first find out what a is, and then substitute to find out what x is. So since we have g of 4 equals 8, that means x equals 4 when this portion equals 8. So if we just put this in, x equals 4, we'll just make that 16 because it's much simpler to write down. 16a plus 24 equals 8. Therefore, if we were to not use a calculator, that means this would mean 16a plus 24 is actually equal to this. See, because 8 and 8 cancel out here. Looking at this, we just take 16 on both sides, so a, and like plus 1 equals 0, because we can just cancel off the 16. And therefore, a has to equal -1 automatically. Since a equals -1, we can now actually write the whole function quite simply, and this would make things way simpler. So a equals -x plus 24. Solving this, we have to find out what -4 is. So therefore, this automatically equals 16, right? So therefore, g of x equals -4 plus 16 plus 24. Whereas therefore, this would probably equal x equals 8 automatically. So the answer is the same, regardless of whether it's positive or it's negative, making our answer A. Now let's move on to number 11. All right, once again, we have a system equation. This one is a little bit disguised in a word problem. The equations above, B and C, represent the price per pound in dollars of beef and chicken, respectively, X weeks after July 1st during the last summer. What was the price of a pound of beef when it was equal to the price of the pound of chicken? Okay, so Therefore, we have to find out what this whole thing is equal to, what x equals when this here is equal. The trick for here is quite simple. Consider equal, we just make both sides equal. Equals 1.75 plus 0.40x. All right, 0.25, 0.40, it's automatically 0.15. So let's write 0.15x here. 1.75 and 2.35. All right, this is quite simple. If we do 0.7, it's 2.45 minus 1, so it's 0.6. Solving this, we get x equals 4. Essentially, it's 4 weeks. What was the price of beef when it was equal to the price per pound of chicken? Well, looking at this, it's just 2.35 plus 0.25x, which is 4, and that's just 1, equals b. And then the answer automatically is 3.35. Therefore, the answer here would be D. Moving on to number 12. In an xy plane that passes through the origin and has a slope of 1 over 7, which of the following points lie down on the line? A couple of methods to do this. Obviously, one would be to do guess and check, right? We just take this, we input it, and then we find it. I found a simpler equation way is to write down the whole entire equation. So the origin would mean that it's 0, 0. Writing down the equation in slope-intercept form, we get y equals 1 slash 7 x plus m. Now we solve for basically m, right? If this equals 0 and this equals 0, there's no y-intercept. So y equals 1 slash 7x. If y equals 1 slash 7x, we just put the 0 here. This cannot equal 7. So if we put 1 here, it still cannot equal 7. So therefore, the answer has to be D, right? Because 14 multiplied by 1 over 7 equals 2. So this is quite simply the answer. Just find the equation and then input answers. So if x is greater than 3, which of the following is equivalent to this huge expression? To solve this, it's quite simple. First, we find out what this whole bottom part actually equals. All right. So what we do is quite simple here. Find out what x plus this thing equals, x plus 2, and x multiplied by x plus 3. You can just FOIL it out, but for the sake of simplicity, you can just calculate instead. Which means that once we add these, it should just equal x squared plus 5x plus 6. All right. And therefore, top parts, when adding x plus 2, which would mean it'd be 2x plus 5, our whole thing would look like, this would be the bottom part when adding these two parts. Our whole thing would thus look like that. 1 divided by 2x plus 5 over x squared plus 5x plus 2, 6. All right? With this, we just make it quite simple to read. Just do 1 divided by 2x plus 5 plus x squared plus 5x plus 6. If we were to multiply these, we just switch over the sides, right? And therefore, solving this would then look like x squared plus 5x plus 6 divided by 2x plus 5. All right, pretty simple there. And therefore, our answer is simply B. Now, it looks pretty complicated, but once you divide it up into small steps, it becomes much simpler. Moving on to the next question, we have if 3y equals 12, what is the value of x, 8 to the power of x minus 2 to the power of y? We have one of these equations, and we're supposed to just make these into exponents. All right? So the way we do this is we first do it so that 8 to the power of x 2 to the power of y is therefore quite simply made that 2 to the power of 3, so therefore 2 to the power of 3x divided by 2 to the power of y is what we're trying to solve. Therefore, looking at this, we just have to do 2 to the power of 3x, and since we just have to like subtract it, 3x minus y. All right, 3x minus y simply equal to 12. So we're solving for 2 to the power of 12. Quite simple, but it looks really difficult when you look at it this way. So all we had to do was first simplify what this thing is, and then we just input it using this equation. Our answer is just A. All right, let's move on to number 15. If ax plus 2 multiplied by bx plus 7 equals 15x squared plus cx plus 14, for all values of x and a plus b equals 8, what are the two values of c? Looking at this, we have to first find out what c equals. And the way we solve this is quite simple. C is actually equal to 2ax, right? Actually equal to 7ax plus 2bx. We get this because 7ax and then 2bx. And that's the only way we can get x to the first power. All right? And therefore, and a plus b equals 8. So we have to first find out what ab also equals 15 because a times b is 15 over here. The only things that satisfy this are 5 and 3. So a can equal 5 or it can equal 3 and b can equal 3 or it can equal 5. Either way, solving this, we get the first type, which would be 5 and 3, means 35x plus 6x, which is 41x. Second one would be 21x plus 10x, which equals 31x. That leaves two of them, which means D is the answer. Right? Moving on to question number 16. Now these change a bit, but they involve us actually finding the real answer of the question. So, if t is greater than 0 and t squared minus 4 equals 0, what is the value of t? Well, this seems quite simple. T squared is equal to 4 as we simply add both equations on both sides. So therefore, if t squared equals 4, the square root of 4 equals 2. All right? It can also be negative 2, but since this is greater than 0, we just simply disregard that and we move on. All right? So, question number 17. We have this triangle shape here and a word problem associated with it. A summer camp counselor wants to find out a length x in feet across the lake which is represented in the sketch here, the lengths represented by AB, EB, BD, and CD are determined to be 1,800. Okay, this is quite a lot of information, so let's draw it on the diagram here. AB equals 1,400, EB equals 700, BD equals 800. Wait, hold up, we did that a bit wrong. 1,007, 1,800, 1,400, 700, and 800. And our goal is to find out what this is. All right. And obviously AEB and these two have the same measure. So what we get from all of this is that these two triangles are similar because they have these two sides same and the ratio is the same as well. So 700 multiplied by 2 equals 1,400. Therefore, 800 multiplied by 2 equals what? It equals 1,600, and that should be our answer. It looks more complicated if you try to solve each part of it, and you probably wouldn't have as much time for it. So therefore, making like these correct assumptions here is the way to go, rather than solving the whole thing. So, next question is number 18. We have the system of equations again, and this seems pretty simple to do elimination on. We just subtract here, we can solve it quite fast. So, since we're finding x, let's just multiply the whole equation by 2, just because we're finding x, so we have to make it quite simple for us. Since we're subtracting the equation, we just do everything gets subtracted out, which means this gets subtracted, so x, and this becomes like 0, so equals, and then negative 25 becomes positive, and we subtract it from 18, equals 7. So our answer is x equals 7. We just check this just in case, and if x equals 7, y would equal negative 9 minus 7, which means y would equal negative 16. Negative 16. So therefore, in this case, if we multiply y by 2, that means negative 32, which plus 7 would equal negative 25, making this answer correct. So, next question. In a right triangle, one angle measures x while the other where sine of x equals 4 over 5. Right? So what is the cosine of 90 minus x? Well, for this one, I like to draw a diagram, but here we go. If sine of x equals 4 over 5, that means this one would be 4, this one would be 5. This would be the angle x, all right? So triangle would look something like that, right? And since this is a 3, 4, 5 triangle, I'll just add that there. And what our goal, which is this would be in 90 degrees, is to find out what this equals. So a triangle obviously has 180 degrees. 180 minus 90 means that this is the other angle, which would be 90 minus x. Or we're supposed to find the cosine of it. Using SOHCAHTOA, which is my go-to if I forget all my answers. Opposite over adjacent, 4 over 5. Cosine finding, which is adjacent, which is also 4 over 5. And therefore the answer is 4 over 5, or 0.8. Either way. Simply, these two are equal. Now, final question. If a equals 5 root 2 and 2a equals root 2x, what is x? So, we simply do substitution again, which means 2, and we substitute a, so 5 sqrt 2 equals sqrt to x. We make it 10 sqrt2 equals sqrt x. The thing that looks the same in all of this is this 2, so we can simply ignore it, and we just have to get this 10x out of here to make it 10. Or we can put this 10 alternatively back in the square root. Okay, putting it back in the square root would mean that we have to multiply squared, which would thus equal x. Therefore, x equals 100, and that's our answer. That means we solved the whole thing. So that's that. Tune in for some more videos, more tips on SAT math. Thank you.